It's Daria and Sebastian Cocioba, and today we are joining you for a new YANE podcast episode, podcast by YANE team about biotech everything. And we have Sebastian, who is a molecular florist, biohacker, DIY bio person, whatever you. What do you like to be called?
I don't know. I'm an amateur biologist. That's kind of the title. Yeah. Everything else is just like, pretty details, but amateur biologist is, or independent researcher if it has to be a professional title, but I don't care. Yeah.
I just saw I think it's on Facebook or like Instagram where you call yourself, it's in your bio, it says like molecular florist. And I just really like that.
Yeah.
That sounds very cool.
It doesn't exist yet, right? So I'm trying to make it happen because like a lot of the botanical research into flower morphology is more academic and less applied because of all the GMO regulations. So like one day when I grow up, I'd love to design flowers. Until then, I'm going to pretend to be a biologist, and like do research to build the tools because it's like I want to do oil painting and I don't have paint. Like I have to grind my own freaking pigments. And the pigments are regulated, right? So.
Oh yeah. And you have to like be an institution to get those pigments.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So like I'm basically dedicating the next like 5 years of my life to making this as least regulatable as possible, like using like sugar instead of herbicide and things like that to try to make it more accessible and to also give like evidence that like, here, look, there's tons of amateur biologists doing meaningful stuff. Can you not be crazy with your regulations?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We all know that mostly people see, especially biohacker is such a triggering word that not a lot of people use it. And I just choose to use it to be like, no, I swear there's like normal people. I swear. I kind of want to just like wash that name of all the dirt that already.
If you can do that, that's incredible. I hope you can. For me, it feels kind of like how Monsanto was, how they had to just like kill the name because it has too much like negative connotation to it. Like that's why I kind of distance myself from the term biohacker. Not because I have anything against the ethos. It's just like what people think it is and what the media has portrayed it to be is different from what I vibe with, essentially. Like what my biology is a little bit different than what some biohackers see biology as, and that's okay. I'm just trying to like carve out a space for folks that want to do like research, like biology research.
Yeah, definitely. In Ukraine and all the post-Soviet countries, when you say the word biohacking, if people know what it is, they think it's like bulletproof biohacking. It's like,
like
using
coffee and like butter in your coffee.
Or like, I don't know, having weird sleeping schedule, or like, I don't know, all this weird stuff. So, because I'm like a first biohacker in Ukraine, people are like, oh, are you doing anything on like longevity and stuff like that? I'm like, no, sorry, I kind of want to die, so it's not my thing.
Nice. That's a cool follow-up.
Yeah. So yeah, it's in the beginning I didn't really call myself biohacker because I was like, oh, there's like a lot of controversy there, and we know the examples. So I just called myself DIY biologist because I like that term too. I still use it.
Sure.
Because I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, I feel bad for term biohacking because this word is actually like, it sounds cool. That's a nice word.
I mean, like I love solar punk, right? Like cyberpunk and solar punk have been something I was interested in for a little bit. Solar punk more than anything, but I didn't even know I was interested in it until much later, as to like a genre. But like solar punk has turned into this like greenwashed, hyper organic tech utopia meets like local farms, which is nice, but like none of that vision has genetically engineered plants in the equation at all. Like if you look at all the art produced when people think of the word solar punk, you see like things we know as natural and then extremely advanced technology harmoniously interacting, which is nice, but I'm like, you're also harmoniously interacting with the plant's genomes, and that's a technology, but they don't really embrace that. And so like, I wish I could wash the term solar punk for it to mean something a little bit more than just this kind of naive notion that nature is perfect, and technology needs to blend in with that nature. I think like if we're to survive, we kind of have to modify our nature, And so, yeah, it's like something that I wish people would consider, instead of just like everything's organic farming, how about like all the fruit are suddenly better for you, or there's no more peanut allergies because we deleted the allergy gene, in peanuts. Like advance the technology of what nature looks like is something I really want to see one day.
No, definitely. Yeah, I don't like when people are like, no, nature created with it. We don't bother. It's like, don't play God. I'm like, I mean, nature also created cancer. So do we just like, oh, thank you, nature. Nice.
Yeah,
thank you for this gift. Yeah.
Yeah. I love kids dying at 12 to brain cancer. It's wonderful.
Fun. Oh gosh.
Yeah. And that's something that I wish people would kind of focus on a little bit, is just like a little bit of realism, right? And because I'm a romantic myself. I like squishy stuff, but the overwhelming narrative is this like, don't touch nature, just build the technology so it's just like kind of manages nature in a way that's like hands off. But I'm like, the corn you eat, if it was natural corn, you would have cracked your teeth, like teosinte, the origin of corn, the ancestor of corn, it's hard as a rock, like even if you cook it, it's super, super dense. And so like without our breeding practices, which people don't see as engineering, they see it as natural. We can mix thousands, hundreds of thousands of genes randomly, and it's okay. But if you do precision engineering, oh boy, don't do that. You add one gene and
you're playing
fire.
God. Yeah. I hate that. I hate when people say like, you're playing God. I'm like, okay, so when invented penicillin, it's not playing God, because he cured like basically hundreds of millions of people who would have died without penicillin. Why is that not playing God?
Yeah, or like look at all the roads we built so our cars can drive on top of them. We like destroyed whole ecosystems to build parking lots, but that's not playing God, right? Like permanently changing the ecosystem is not playing God, but like putting a glowing gene into shit bacteria, oh boy, that's God territory.
That's a bioweapon or whatever.
What a boring God they think we're playing, like there's so much more cooler stuff out there that we don't know, that we have no control over, and they're just like, oh, don't make shit bacteria glow. Pardon the rant.
Yeah, no,
you know the story too well.
Oh yeah, I'm just tired of it. So actually, I did a bit of research on you, and I don't really know how you got to start, being an amateur biologist.
It's a good question.
Like, what's your background? How'd you come up with, like, one day you're just like, oh, I'm gonna start doing this?
I wish it was that simple and that straightforward, but well, the original story was when I was a kid, I think around like 7 or 8, I don't remember exactly, but my aunt got me a microscope kit for my birthday, just like a really crappy one, but it was a microscope. And I opened it up. I was super excited. And the first thing I did was I took the microscope, I put a slide underneath, and I rammed the objective through the slide, and I broke the microscope. Right. First thing, the first time I ever held a piece of scientific equipment, I broke it. Right. So great start. Awesome start. And so it wasn't like super broken. One of the objectives were cracked, but anyway, me and my mom like spent some time repairing it. And then she took some fountain pen ink from my dad's office, because he likes writing in fountain pen ink. He has this like really, really pretty cyan and a purple. And the purple ink, we didn't know, but the purple, well, I didn't know that she knew, but the purple ink at the time is a student's ink. It's crystal violet, and that's used in microscopy stains. And she knew that because in her school, she would write with that ink. She was born in the 50s. She would write with that ink, and then for her biology class, she would use that ink to stain plants, right, to be able to see it on like a crude microscope. And so she did that and put it under the microscope, and actually made me not break the slide. And that was like the first time I looked through it, and that was the first time I ever saw cells like in real life for myself, right? Like I was learning about them in textbooks, but it was just kind of like mystical nonsense being thrown at me. Like there's this microscopic world that you cannot see, that exists all kinds of complexity that you cannot touch, right? And for me as a kid, it felt like I was just learning like people were telling me things, and I just had to memorize it, right? But when I saw cells through that microscope, that first moment, I was like, fuck. Okay, that's really cool. Like, and I just started like staring at stuff, and I had no direction, but it was so fulfilling to just like look at random stuff, right? For no purpose whatsoever, just purely entertainment. And I didn't know until much later, but that was like the seeds of this like craving I had for exploration. but not like the tech bro climbing Mount Everest kind of exploration. That's really, really fucking boring. But I'm talking about like honest to goodness exploration, but I'm also lazy, so I didn't want to go very far, right? Combine the two together, and microbiology became this like beautiful kind of little sandbox to kind of play in, right? And started like culturing some bacteria that I got from suppliers in like a bedroom lab, right? So like essentially in my actual bedroom, I had a tiny desk, like a little centrifuge, and I slowly started saving up, and I got better with plants, and noticed that after trying to clone some for my mom for Mother's Day, I realized that I could sell those plants. So I started this little business of selling plants, paid for 2 years of college, just flipping orchids, which was really cool. And in college, I heard about plant genetic engineering, right, for the very first time. And I was a biology major. It was like my 3rd year of college. And I had to enroll in a research lab because in order for me to graduate from my university, I needed 1 research course, right? So 1 semester of actual research. And I didn't want to do HIV or cancer or mammalian stuff. I found it kind of boring. And so I found the only plant lab that was doing like interesting stuff. And I approached them, and the guy asked me, the PI was just like, okay, why are you here? I'm like, I like plants. He's like, are you pre-med? I'm like, no. And he's like, oh, thank God. Okay, you start tomorrow. Because he just got tired of people like coming into his lab and saying like, oh yeah, I really like what I'm doing here, but it's really just for the credit as fast as possible. You know, like there was no interest in the research topic. They just had to go through the motions, and most of them were pre-medical students. So they didn't care about the research. They just wanted the credit. And that kind of, it was refreshing for him. So he actually let me do stuff that he would normally not let some of his students do, because I was actually committed, and I would actually skip class to stay in the lab and do more stuff. So I was there to go to school, but I skipped a lot of my classes to stay in the lab and do science. And I didn't tell them what my courses were, right? And they're just like, how are you here all the time? I'm like, shut up, let me do this. This is cool. And so I learned some skills there. And then some family and financial stuff happened, and I had to pull out of college. But that craving for exploration, armed with the skills of knowing how to do plant genetic engineering, essentially like set an impossible to stop path of me doing plant genetic engineering at home, right? So like I would go through my notebook, because I copied some of the notes from the lab notebook to mine, just the protocols. And I go through my notebook and I started like shopping around for all the parts, like everything I needed to do plant engineering. And that took like 5 years and a lot of haggling, because I don't make much money. And a lot of this stuff, as you know, is super regulated or impossible to access. So I had to find like loopholes, and like I had to like rent a different space. And yeah, it was very complicated. But the end result is that now I do science in my pajamas. And I basically do, yeah, I do consultation work for startups and universities. Right now I'm a remote employee at Stanford, building some robots for a lab.
Heck
and,
yeah.
And what's cool is that like with any leftover, with any leftover parts that I can kind of like shape a more custom, more cheaper version of that device, and then kind of do what I like doing is like taking an expensive device and making it infinitely cheaper, you know, and then just distributing it. So I can't quite talk about what the device is, but really looking forward to when I can, because I'm going to essentially like live stream the build of assembling this frigging electrical monster. But I think the end result will be a really cool instrument. But I just can't believe that I went from what is DNA to like consulting for Stanford at all, right? Because like full disclosure, I have no formal degree whatsoever. I have no official formal training. I did some college, but really, I told you, I skipped my classes and stood in the lab. So my professional background, my academic background is like zero, but my in terms of professional stuff, I've been doing like consultation work for private and public for like the last 10 years now, pretty much. Yeah, so started my home lab 15 years ago. Been doing consultation work with plant stuff for about 10 years. And then like genetic engineering stuff with plants, I started doing that the last like 5 years, essentially. Yeah, so I'm basically trying to become a professional amateur biologist. Yeah, somehow.
That's quite an oxymoron, but
definitely. Because like I might get paid, maybe, right? So it's not like a steady gig, right? It's like freelancing, right? And so like at most I'm an independent researcher, but for like for profit, but then I take that money and I funnel it into the nonprofit that I run with my friend, Binomica Labs. And that basically takes up all of my money, right? So
I understand that.
yeah. So at the end of the day, it's like pure independent research, no institutional help whatsoever. You know, like if I have to flip burgers, I'll flip burgers, but at night, at least I can do science, you know.
That's quite impressive. So you started your lab 15 years ago?
More or less, yeah, like 15, 16 years ago.
So it's like you were like on the first wave of DIY bio.
Yeah, pretty much. Like my research partner was there like when it started for sure. Like Mackenzie Cowell and Jason Bobe and those meetings, because he's a co-founder of GenSpace. So like he was there from the very, very beginning. I came in a little bit later, but yeah, in the early days. I mean, I think my first post was in 2008 on the DIY bio forum. Just go like saying something less like, how do you restriction enzyme? And it's really, I really want to find it. It's adorable. I want to like frame it.
No, it's like important. It's important to remember how you started, where you came from.
Yeah, like it was the first interaction I had with the scientific community, amateur or otherwise. It was like the very first time where I wasn't on like a hobby forum talking about like remote control cars or robotics or electronics or something. This was like for the hobby of biology, and that was like my first post. And I mean, I'm super grateful for the fact that there was a forum to begin with, right? That there was like some type of a digital gathering of people doing this. Because when I first started, before I heard of DIY Bio, this was extremely lonely, right? Like this was a very, very solo endeavor. And on top of a lot of pushback, like obviously from parents, right? They're like, the fuck are you doing? Now they're all on board. They're like, this stuff is really cool. Because my parents are old now, so what's it called? I live with them, help them out, and in exchange, I only pay rent for my room and this, right? So, and my lab space rent. So like this is the third bedroom of my mom's apartment that I turned into a bio lab, essentially.
Nice.
Yeah. But
it's quite inspiring. You know what? It reminds me of kind of our journey, because I definitely understand like spending all of your, like getting some money and then spending it all on your lab and experiments and just like helping grow. Because like, I mean, same. It reminds me of, you know, artists and scientists back in the day, because they like, they were just like, it was their main thing they did, but it was kind of like a hobby just because you had to do something else to survive, to like pay your bills.
Yeah, it's like a job versus a vocation of sorts, you know, like I'm still trying to find the words for it, but it's like the thing you do to like nourish your soul versus the thing you do to keep your lights on. You know, and sometimes that overlaps, right? So like I find myself as semi-pro amateur biologist because like 9 out of 10 times it's entirely out of pocket. Sometimes I get clients that will pay for some stuff, you know, but because of the lack of funding, it's hard to say that I am a professional scientist, you know, because like I don't have a salary.
Yeah, I mean, understand, but like I don't know, comparing to Ukrainian scientists, they still don't get much of a salary. So like where I come from is just like, you're poor anyway, so who cares? At least we'll just do at least what you like.
Yeah, right. And that's kind of because of the whole family and financial stuff that happened that kicked me out of college. That kind of framed the whole, it became a bit fatalistic, but it became an idea of, I don't care what I do career-wise, I just want to do science, right? And they're not mutually exclusive, where I need to have a career in science in order to do science. And I think that was that like little glimpse of nirvana of going like, oh shit, I can just do science. Like I can just do science, right? Like I'll do whatever other job, but then at the end of the day, this is for me. That realization was the most liberating, because like you said, if you're going to be poor, at least, you know, do something you love. And I'm trying to take this to the logical extreme, where I want to see if I can make a living out of doing something I love, right? But in a indirect kind of way. A little hard to explain, but basically like do as little projects that are outside of something that will teach me something important, you know. So like I'm trying to say no to projects that like pay well but are not interesting, for lack of better words, you know, because like right now, while I'm still relatively young, I can still make some mistakes in the sense of like experiment different career paths of like, oh, I really like protein engineering, or I really like just standard plant biology or whatever. And so like I don't take on like boring projects. Like I get maybe 10 emails a day about cannabis engineering, and I'm just like, please stop. Please.
Yeah.
Please.
I'm not even gonna tell you what I receive. Oh,
Yeah, I'm
gosh.
actually scared. I'm scared of what your inbox looks like.
No, it's like it's mostly about enlarging some parts of man's body, and I'm just like, that's enough.
Yeah.
I think I started getting that after Josiah just like emailed someone, just text Josiah, or just text Daria about it. And I'm like, gosh, thanks.
So, yeah, throw me under the penis enlargement bus. God. Yeah.
Or like boldness.
Right, yeah. And it's always just like some dude going just like, I have this problem with my ego and I'm very fragile. Please engineer me better. You know, it's like,
I'm like, dude, that's not gonna solve your problems. Like,
yeah, hair is not gonna make you cool, man. Cool comes from here.
Yeah, that's the one with the longer hair here.
Yeah, the pandemic made me give up. I'm just like, you know what? Oh, fuck it.
Really?
I'm just gonna.
Yeah, because like I seen your pictures. You had quite a shorter hair.
Yeah, I just like, because I don't go outside much because of the everything. It's hard for me to like get a semi-decent headshot that'll represent me for the next 20 years, right? Like I'm taking on certain aspects of academia, which is like you get one professional headshot and you roll with it for years and years and years. So like I'm starting to feel very at home with the way academics present themselves. But yeah, like, I mean, I would rather my work speak for myself. I don't like having a little face avatar thing, but I'm waiting for some really cool GMOs to replace it. And then I'm never going to put my face on anything again. I'm just going to be like, here, plant. Just
I know. It's like the most irritating thing. It's like you have to show your face, or like when you're filming or whatever, and you're like, oh, I wish I could just talk more. But it's like, that's the hardest part, because it's like, you kind of have to.
Yeah. Especially if you're doing not activism, but a little bit of like outreach of just like, hey, look, amateur biologists do cool stuff. We're not bioterrorists. You have to put your face on it. You know, you can't be anonymous at that point, because there needs to be some type of vulnerability or like some skin in the game, you know? So I get that. But yeah, I'd rather just like make cool flowers and make tools for other people to make cool flowers. That's kind of the goal. Yeah.
So why flowers? It's interesting. You know, I think you're the only person I know in biohacking community that actually wants to do like actual plant engineering and had succeeded this much. Because like most of people, that's like, I've done some of the plant, you know, even like tissue culture, and that is pain in the ass. Like I'll stick to bacterium, I'll stick to, you know, mammal cultures, whatever.
It's funny, I think mammalian culture is black magic. Like, you guys are just like, oh, the only way this works is if you use the essence of a dead baby cow. And I'm like, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, you can use your own serum.
That's even weirder, right? Just like take a step back for a second. I'm just like, oh, let me bleed for my science. I'm like, I do enough sweat and tears on this desk. I don't need to bleed, you know, like that's an OSHA violation. So there's, I mean, so I've been trying to get more people to do plant biology, right? Like plant engineering. I even started a Facebook group, right? So we have the Petal Smiths Plant Genetic Engineering Research Party. And we're currently at 420 members, so I'd like to lock it down because that number is very special.
Yeah.
But if anyone's interested, feel free. Petal Smiths.
I'll put it in the description, definitely.
Cool. Yeah, and prior to COVID and me screwing up my back, I had office hours every Tuesday. I'm trying to get it back on track, but essentially, like every holiday, I make goodie bags of plasmids so that people can distribute for free, just to kind of like bootstrap people's experiences with it. And I'm using everybody at the Petal Smiths group as a guinea pig for testing out my unofficial PhD thesis called Flowers for Everyone. And I'm basically building tools so that you don't have to use antibiotics anymore in the process of molecular cloning and plant genetic engineering. So it's just sugar all the way, like selection with sugar instead of selection with antibiotics by deleting some genes. So so they'll be beta testing those. And to answer the question about why flowers, which is always fun, so I'm, from the beginning, I've been interested in morphology, in like shape. Right. So like when I look at a plant, I'm interested in its shape. I love the way the biodiversity, the morphological diversity of plants is enormous. But the morphological diversity of flower tissue specifically is even more diverse. Right. And because this organ is very specific to the survival of the species, but not necessarily the survival of the organism, it's kind of an open canvas to modify while keeping the important stuff still functioning. like the leaves and the roots and the photosynthesis, right? So if I only target the petals, if I only target the flower itself, I can make really crazy, insane shapes and colors and fragrances even without actually, hopefully, damaging the actual plant. So you have something to build your flower onto. And not only that, but it's like one of the first things that we experience as kids, right? Like touching a plant, touching a flower, running through a garden, running through a backyard. Plants have been so like intimately tactile with human beings that I think that modifying a plant, modifying a flower, making it look different would resonate more with kids than making shit bacteria go from brown to green, right? Because the poop bacteria on the plate is abstract. It's just this blob, and you're told that it does stuff, but you don't really see it. And then you did some magic with little drops of clear liquid, and all of a sudden it glows green. That's interesting. But comparatively, it's not as oomph because you also can't touch it, right? But if you make a flower that's white, and all of a sudden you have streaks of like neon blues and greens and yellows and pinks everywhere, and it wasn't like that before, that this plant would have never been like that had it not been for you, that's an empowering moment. That's a moment that really just makes you go like, whoa, I'm capable of doing so much. And if you can put that into
that's very gratifying, I think.
It really is. Yeah. If you can put that into the mind of a high school student, that they are capable of modifying the natural world, and it's because of that intimacy, they might even inspire them to learn more about the natural world. And then hopefully, in the grand goal of this, is to be a little bit more of an activist in protecting said natural world, because you start realizing just how much you lose. So like introduce somebody with a fantastical idea and then slowly bring in the doom, slowly go like, so we're fucked. The world's on
we're gonna
fire.
have to do something.
Yeah, and here's a nice little sandbox for you to practice before you have to do the really important stuff like drought tolerance or Rubisco modifications. So like I don't want to scare people, and this is a personal thing for me. So I do it out of joy, right? Like this is purely just a hobby. The flower design aspect is purely just it's hedonic. It gives me pleasure to do so. But if that could be a tool, a jumping off point between a kid who's like indifferent about science to being really excited about biotechnology and where they fit in it, and that they have access to it, that could change lives, So, and I don't promise to be able to change any lives, but if anybody goes like, maybe science is cool after seeing some of the stuff that they have made, not the stuff I've made, but the stuff they have made with their hands, I think my job's done. One person, that's the goal. Convince one person that science is interesting. Yeah.
No, I definitely get it, because especially I do understand, I feel like a lot of people ask you why plants, and probably I'm one of them. But it's also, some people ask me, how do you do genetic engineering? Because like, I know before I, went to university, I didn't know anything, or started doing biohacking. I didn't know how genetic engineering was actually, how do you modify something?
Sure, yeah.
And then I was like, oh, you just transfer liquid from one tube to another. Then you like incubate it, and then like maybe add another liquid and just incubate it on a plate. And that's your whole...
Ta-da!
You're just like using this tiny little droplet of usually clear.
Right.
Yeah,
like little drops of hope and trust and superstition and suspicion. Yeah, it's very mystical and abstracted. Like definitely. And I mean that's why I really like the idea of working with plants, is because if somebody says why are plants important, all I have to do is ask them to breathe for a second, to just take one deep breath, just go. 80% of that oxygen came from algae in the ocean. The other 20% came from trees, from plants, right? Like all the food that we eat either eats plants or is a plant, like the physical air we breathe, the fact that we're alive and we don't die in 6 minutes is because of plants and algae. So why plants? Everything, right? Like it's the primary producer, and from a poetic standpoint, it sips starlight. It literally eats the sun and produces all the things for us, right? It's the most sci-fi thing ever. It takes in air and light and water and turns it into sugar. What? That's like alchemy, right? And it's primary production. It's not like you put a bacteria in an already rich nutrient broth. This is like you put it in salt, right? And a little bit of vitamins, and all of a sudden you just get like whole bodies coming out of this dish that they have made from air, right? Like that shit gives me goosebumps every time. Like that's the be all end all of plants, is the fact that they built everything around us. So like, what better way for a person who likes plants than to spend their time than to spend it studying the things that eat starlight and give us our breath.
No, well, that was impressive, actually. I kind of went silent for a second. What do you hope to do in the future besides, like, okay, you want to encourage that one person to start doing science, but like, would you want to open a school, or like, I don't know, launch a YouTube channel, or like, what do you?
So yeah, that's a good question. So my research partner Sung and I, we have Bionomica Labs, our nonprofit, and we are very much interested in the idea of independent research, right? Where if we can be a hub for that, if we can be a liaison between the amateur explorer and formal publication and academic rigor, if we can connect them to formal researchers so they can get feedback, that could be something I'd be really interested in doing, right? So like, in the future, in an ideal world, I'd love to grow my nonprofit, like, tremendously. Like, I'd like to be able to provide the infrastructure, provide the like, become an ISBN number holder so we can publish things, right? So we can give digital object identifier numbers to amateur biologists for their work. As long as we publish once a year, we are technically a scientific publishing house, or at least a publishing house, right? So there's some like interesting loopholes where we can provide pseudo-institutional support without the institution, without the expectation of gratitude or debt of any kind, right?
Without the paywalls.
Nothing. Yeah. It's just like, look, you want to do science? Here's a preprint prep, right, to get you started, right? And yeah, so that would be a vision that I'd really like to execute on, but that requires money. So instead of trying to beg for stuff, I realized that I can grow my for-profit, right, and do more intense contract work for plant genetic engineering, because unlike other labs that require a lot of university overhead, I can start the second you give me your tube of DNA, and if it's in tobacco, I can give you results in 5 weeks, right? If not sooner, depending on the indicator. So that could be really lucrative as just this distributed transformation pipeline, right? Because like, competitive prices are like $1,200 for 10 plants. That's a pretty sweet deal if you can optimize it. So exploring that as well. But I mean, I'd love to teach. If ever there was some like weird loophole that I could actually get a formal degree, I would love to teach. Like, going for an academic position where I get to actually like teach people about biology would be a dream. Totally. It's just, I've been like essentially like pushed away from academia for a very long time, even though I definitely want to be a part of it. I gave up on the notion of a career in academia entirely. Partly because I'm already like 32, and the window for jobs are very ageist. Like, ageism's real in academia, right? And there's also not that many jobs, like, for biologists. Like, if you have a biology degree, good luck getting a job. In industry, maybe, like, if I can bite the bullet and find a startup or a company that I like, that I could just make a lot of money doing something simple, and then use that to what I'm doing right now, like, funnel all that money into nonprofit and grow interesting things, right? That would be the goal. Like, my career is not necessarily focused on money rather than particular milestones. And one of them is to really refine the process of onboarding folks into what it means to do biology as an amateur, right? Like, here are the tools, here are the stuff, here's some resources, what are you interested in, Like, we're not going to like sell products, but we're trying to like make connections. I know that sounds like a little vague and stuff, but it's also very dependent on what happens next, right? Like, it's hard for me to plan too much ahead. Only recently have I had a research project that is like long-term, like maybe a 5-year project, this Flowers for Everyone thing, that is cohesive enough that I can predict reasonably accurately what the future will look like. But beyond that point, I don't know. Like, I'm going to do a proper PhD thesis. A bunch of my professor friends agreed to be on my committee, and like, I'll do a defense, I'll live stream it. It just doesn't count for anything, right? Like, I'll publish the papers, I'll make the 400-page monster. I'll give birth to that demon, but under no academic credit, right? Because I just want to be a better biologist, and being forced to focus really deeply on something that I'm passionate about and have formal academics rip me to pieces and basically correct me so I can become a better biologist. That's what I want. You know, like mentorship has been something I've been lacking my whole life. And I think I found a way to get that mentorship. So that's my goal. I'm very like narrow focused. Like, I don't know where I'm going to be in the next 5 years, but I know I'm going to have a bunch of sugar plasmids and they're going to be awesome. That's it. Yeah.
No, what, you know, academia is great and academia is horrible in the same time. I mean, I guess a lot of people agree. Inside, outside academia. I graduated with my bachelor's this summer, and I am not, you know, thank you. I'm surprised they didn't kick me out for all the controversy it caused. But and I graduated and I was just like, thank God. Like, I'm not going for master's in the next few years. I'm just resting after that. Yeah, there's something very soul-sapping about being a student, right? But I do have to admit that undergraduate is hell. Graduate school is at least interesting, and a doctorate program, for me personally, just because I love this shit, is kind of bliss because they pay you, it's free, and you get to focus on one thing, right? Survival, because you're super poor, but also science. But that's I don't know, that type of structure. If it existed elsewhere, if it wasn't in academia, if the idea of getting a PhD was akin to getting a driver's license, I would be the first in line at the DMV. You know, like, I don't care if it's difficult. I just don't like the bureaucratic red tape of what a GPA is, right? Because I'm not a good test taker, but I'm okay as a biologist. Like, I'm all right. I still got a ton to learn, obviously. So I'm still holding on to that amateur statement strongly, not because of lack of experience, but because like the Everest in front of me is very tall. But the interesting part of it is that like you get to explore all these things and have a sense of organization to it, right? Because like doing random science is cool, but like it becomes this like chaos, and mentally it becomes very cloudy for me, where I'm like, what am I doing? Where am I going? Not that I have to go somewhere, but just a direction somewhere. So I agree, or like a structure.
Exactly, yeah. So if this structure existed outside of academia, I'd be super happy, but there is very little, if at all. So hopefully, if I get enough people to take amateur biology or research as a hobby seriously, we don't need that. We can just peer review one another and then put it on bioRxiv and then have professional scientists peer review that. And then like basically make a bridge between academia and DIY bio. Because like there was a rupture saying like, fuck the system, all these regulations. Sure, I understand that. But the scientists are saying the same for a lot of the regulations, that they might be a little bit too intense. Some of them are very important and they need to be there, but some of them are a little crazy. So instead of fuck the system, how about like work with the current generation of academics and build a better system, right? Like, I don't want to be a defeatist and break down the ivory tower. I'd rather just like build a cooler tower down the road, you know? And
then everyone's like, oh, that's nicer.
yeah, right. So like, I mean, there's this huge there's this uproar recently that so Nature, the publishing house, Nature Neuroscience, just said that their open access cost for publication is $11,000. $11,000. But the catch is, as soon as you publish, it's freely available for everyone, right? $11,000. And all of the academics are like, what are you fucking insane, right? And all of them were just like, here, let me fix this for you. bioRxiv, right? It's free. Preprints, they're free. That's like the heartblood of academia now, especially with COVID. The heartblood of that has been preprints. So like the notion of the ivory tower where we give tax money to a bunch of private companies, I hope all the academics come out and take sledgehammers to this stupid tower and build a better one, you know, build one where science integrity and the what's it called? The generation of and curation of knowledge is at the forefront, not publish or perish and like, oh, how many Nature papers do you have, right? Even though you just took tax money and gave it to a private entity for no reason. Like, who the fuck is Nature, right? Like, the reviewers don't get paid. The reviewers are fellow academics.
Yeah.
The submitters pay $11,000 to host a PDF on a website. Sci-Hub is free.
Yeah, Sci-Hub. Thank God for Sci-Hub. I don't know how I would have done my thesis, my bachelor thesis without Sci-Hub, honestly.
Yeah, I wouldn't be here without it. Yeah. like LibGen and Sci-Hub. LibGen for books. Like I absorb books. I inhale that shit, especially if it's textbooks. I love it so much. But I would break the bank because they're like $100 a pop. I'm like, okay, I'll buy one textbook a year. Cool, right? So with LibGen, I'm just like, download all the books. Like, fuck it. If people think I'm a pirate, good, because this information should be free. I'm not holding back companies. I'm not. This is taxpayer money being extorted, right? Like, this is one of those moments where it's okay to put on the, like, hoist the colors and put on the black flag. Yeah. But yeah, they're like, again, because I'm broke, access is important, and access then became the entire theme of my work, right? Like, the first thing I'm doing
open source stuff. Like, I actually have 3D printed your geographeresis tray.
Oh, cool.
Long time ago, because I was like, that's nice. It's like super simple. And I was just like, that's so easy to do, even if you never, I don't know, held a soldering iron in your hand. Right.
And that's the goal. Like, I flipped a lot of equipment through eBay. Like, I repaired it and then sold it at a premium, and I kept the good ones for myself. So I built up a pretty fancy lab, but the more I realized, the more time I spent, the more I realized you don't need the fancy stuff, right? So like, a lot of my time I dedicate to, like, take the $6,000 spectrophotometer and turn it into like something really simple that just reads the optical density inside of a tube nonstop for 24 hours, right? So you get growth curves without taking a sample out. Yeah. And you can have like 20 of these running in a shaker. Like, you throw it in the shaker, connect it to an Arduino, let it shake, and it records every second. You get these beautiful growth curves. And you can do incredible amounts of science, because media is not a solved problem. You know, there's infinite amounts of different media necessary to grow bacteria, but the morphology of the growth curve, depending on different changes in media, to optimization or just to explore, is endless. Like, you can always add more stuff to soup to make it interesting, right? So in this bacterial soup, there's so many things that we take for granted. Like, what the hell is yeast extract? Like, dead yeast bodies ground up molecularly, what does that mean, right? Like, can you quantify how much yeast bodies how many corpses have been thrown into the fire, right? It's difficult. So I've like fallen in love with minimal media, and I started doing like a background history report with my research partner, and that's been so like all the bottles here, all of these guys, those are all different media formulations from 2015, when I was like super gung-ho about this project. So basically, I built a simpler version of one of these, and when I got my first growth curve, I saw a blip, a little bump in the data, right? And at Biohack the Planet 1, I think I gave a talk on that blip, and I'm still exploring it to this day because it's so cool. It's like a 5-minute sudden change in the growth curve, right? Like, it goes exponential, and then it just pauses for a little bit, and then it keeps going. It's a sudden change for exactly 5 minutes, but it's so sudden, and the whole population changes for 5 minutes. And no one's seen it before, because no one's ever recorded every second, because people have said that that's stupid. Well, this is where curiosity comes in. I built it because it's cool, and I wanted to know more. And that just opened up the door to like, what is that? Like, what's this blip? Or why is this one linear? Or there's like so many modalities to the boring growth curve that we were missing because we needed a lab slave to take a sample every hour, right? So no more lab slaves, we got these stuff, right? And I mean, it's the build is super simple. It's just a LED on one side, a schmancy light sensor that I bought for $1 on the other. All the plans are online on my GitHub, ongoing project, of course. But yeah, so these tools for exploration don't have to be complicated. And there's so many questions left unanswered, right? Because the benefit for us is that academia follows a very competitive granting cycle. So the topics that which they do research with has to be the hot topic du jour, or something that is impactful enough to translatable medicine, or, you know, the usual stuff. So
what gets you money?
Exactly, yeah, whatever gets you money. But the problem is that there's more questions than there are stars in the universe, right? And there's not enough people to explore them. So when people say like, oh, I was born too late to explore the world and born too soon to explore the cosmos, total bullshit. There's an entire cosmos underneath your feet, right? The first 6 inches, if you just scoop and streak, chances are you'll find microbes no one's ever seen before, right? So like, there's so much room for exploration. And I think science communicators are doing a terrible disservice by not inviting people to explore as well. Instead of just like being told what science is, as if it's this mystical thing from very, very intelligent people, not like you, instead of that feeling, how about just like, there are so many things, go outside and go find stuff, right? Like it doesn't need to be overly enthusiastic. Like I'm a Labrador for science. I love this shit. And I'm just like, everything's so exciting. But the moral of the story is that like, there's just so many questions, right? And building the tools so that people don't have to spend a lot of money and get straight to the science is incredibly gratifying, right? Like it's like soul nourishing surrounded by like crazy anti-vaxxers and like the world's on fire and all that doom and gloom. You have this tiny little island of hope where every bit of dirt from the floor could be a new exploration rabbit hole, So like worst case, escapism, maybe a little staving away the existential dread, but like imagine escapism where the byproduct to the escapism is science for the benefit of humanity, right? Like, because you never know what you will find. Like, I hate quoting Donald Rumsfeld, but he said something very smart. He said, there are two types of things. There are things we know we don't know, and there are things we don't know we don't know. And it's the biggest arrogance to think that we know what we don't know. We know all the things that need to be found, and that a kid with a cup and a microscope cannot discover something new, something important, something like monumental, or could just fucking have fun exploring the world around them. Right? Like forget about like, oh, if you're not winning a Nobel Prize or starting a startup, you're wasting your time, right? And I mean, I'm leading by a terrible example because like, I don't recommend this lifestyle to anybody, but like, maybe it's okay to just live your life. Maybe it's okay to just like follow your dreams until you crash your life into a mess. Because you're gonna die anyway.
I agree. I feel like lately there's been so much just this bullshit about, just follow your dream, work hard, just like don't sleep, get that, startup done and all that stuff. Yeah. Just people worshiping money. And that's money is the least of the things.
I mean, look, if I don't think the world's ready if I had $1 billion. I would really fuck some shit up. And by that, I mean, just like ideally, if possible, because you need to be you need to be surrounded by a lot of people who have been teaching for a very long period of time. But like, if I had a ton of money, I would love to turn the largest public school system in the world here in New York City into a breathing research institute, one giant institute where the students get direct credit for exploring the world around them. Just like, because China recently said they want to sequence everything. Why can't our students do this? Why can't our students go outside, grab a cup of the East River? There's like literally a giant river right outside that nobody cares about because it's like a highway, right? Like, why not get a cup and go find some new species? Like not too long ago, a student on a hike swabbed a leaf, brought it back, and discovered a new branch on the tree of life, the Asgardians, right? Which is like archaea-ish, right? But it's its own branch off of a fucking leaf on a walk. Imagine that was a middle schooler and whose teachers had access to resources that helped them do sequencing and gave that middle schooler permanent credit for redefining the tree of life. Why is that opportunity not available, right? Like, we have the technology.
I absolutely agree. I feel like as many people as possible should do science.
Sure, yeah.
Or like should be able to do that.
Yeah, if they want to. Like, I don't want to force people, but like, if you really want to, like, why are we stopping people from enriching themselves? Like, we have all these like tools open for like learning to code or learning finance or teach yourself in electrical engineering or whatever. But when it comes to biology, you learn it from an experiential level, not a scientist level. You're not getting trained to be a scientist until grad school, So like, all of this education leading up to you never experiencing the process of science. So you don't know how it tastes like. Why would you commit to a career where you don't know how research feels like, right? And all these schools, very few of them have the money to do research. Most of them are broke. Like, my high school was super poor. We had one lab session once in the 4 years I was there. Like 10 blocks away, Dalton High School, they're a $60,000 a year private school. They do yeast genetic engineering freshman year. Yeah, your first year of high school, you're doing yeast engineering with world-renowned scientists as your teachers.
Whoa.
Yeah, and you know how you get that? $60,000 a year. That's fucked up.
Yeah, I agree. No, same in my university. Oh gosh, we had nothing pretty much. Yeah. Like, we would even like, pitch some money to buy even like alcohol to like rub stuff.
Sure, yeah.
Like, you know, there were nothing, like honestly nothing. No PCR machine. I mean, I gave them PCR machine like a few months ago because I was just like, oh gosh, how are you gonna teach these students? Like,
right.
Here, just take it. Because like there was nothing. And
yeah. And that's a failure of the system, not because like, oh, some countries are broke. It's like, no, the prioritization for teaching biology or teaching sciences is so low, right? Like you'd rather grow a factory worker than grow a researcher, right? Which I understand. I mean, like, look, if you're a plumber, you can make 6 figures and work whatever hours you want, and it's pretty chill, and you make a lot of money, you know. In fact, I'm considering becoming an electrician because why not, right? Like fix some houses and be like, hey, does your kid need tutoring? You know, and then just like have a biology side hustle.
Just be like a creepy little like spy of biology. Be like, hey kid, want to do some biology? I want to do some genetic engineering.
Or like I tutor the kid and be like, hey kid, you should break your house's electrical system so I can fix it. Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm kidding. But the like I just want to make this accessible at the end of the day, like as much as I can, because like I have this profound amount of privilege to be able to do this for a lot of my day, and to do this in the comfort of my home and have the experience, the years of experience necessary to bring me here is a huge privilege, and I don't take that for granted. And I think the way to pay it forward is to help teach, like document this, make it accessible, and also like not push people down with their ideas. Right? Like instead of going like, oh, that makes no sense, be like, okay, what are you looking for? Right? Like encourage them, because when people come to me for help, they come to me from a perspective of curiosity, not this is my job, right? Because if they're coming to me for help for their job, I put on my consultation hat and it's 120 an hour, right? If they're coming at me going, I have a home lab and I don't know why my E. coli is not growing, a giant smile comes up on my face and be like, all right, let's think about it, right? And that just, it gives me fuel to like face the bullshit of the day. You know, if I have like one of those conversations a week, I think I can live a pretty decent amount of time. You know, like it's a stress reducer. It really is, because solving someone else's problems that I've solved before is so relieving. Right? I'm just like, okay, I have the answer. Let's talk about it. You know, instead of like, I have no idea. I have deadlines. I'm gonna get fired. Fuck. You know, like that's yeah.
Can you imagine working in an office?
Oh God, Jesus.
Same.
I don't know. No. Well, partly because like I don't know. I would fail. I would be so bad at it. Like it's not like, oh, I dread it. It's just like I would fail. I would be so terrible at office work. Like I'm either gonna work in whatchamacallit, I'm gonna either be an electrician or like a mechanic or something, or do bioengineering. It's one or the other. Because like I need to do something with my hands that makes me feel like I did something that day. Like typing on a computer is just, I can't do it. And I know a lot of biology is typing on a computer, but at least you get to do some interesting stuff, right?
Yeah. I have one final question for you.
Sure.
And it's, what would you change in academia?
Sure. What would I change? That's a great question. There's so many things I'd want to change, but I'd like for the research culture to for a research culture to form that's more focused on the mutual stride towards knowledge and progress, rather than this like secretive hush hush corporate espionage publish and perish cycle. Like if I could change something, it would be the granting structure. How we do grants, how we distribute them, how we judge them, and what that impact looks like on the career of a scientist. Because a lot of good ideas are not funded because maybe 3 people didn't agree with it. That doesn't really make much sense, right? So if the funding structure was, not to use blockchain words because I don't like blockchain, but if it was decentralized in a manner in which there's a way of funding small idea, small funding, big idea, big funding, that kind of concept, but without the, oh, in order for you to get this grant, you need to have had 5 years experience doing the experiment that you're going to do. What? How am I going to get the experience to do the experiment
Yeah,
if I don't have the money to do the experiment, God, right? So yeah, so I would change the funding structure needs to fundamentally change. And if I could add a second one, kill the private publishing system, just murder it. Elsevier and Wiley, they can go fucking catch fire in a corner. The fact that so much public funding, so much tax money, which could have gone to roads and schools and hospitals, public hospitals, all that funding went to these like $26 billion a year revenue monsters that are gatekeeping information, which was paid for by us, right? Like, if in fact, I would move that to number one. Kill nature, kill the god that is nature, stab it in the throat, right? Like, the biggest impediment to a student's learning, to research in general, is friction between the exchange of information, right? And outside of the prestige of publication and all that bullshit, the ego trips, it also justifies more funding. The more CNS papers you have, the more funding I mean, the more qualified you are, more competitive you are for a grant. So it's like self-perpetuating. But I'm starting to see folks, especially the guy who started bioRxiv, one of the co-founders of medRxiv and bioRxiv, he's getting more and more journals to accept the whole preprint to journal seamlessly, where you could take your preprint, upload it, and then it'll format and do its magic and then submit it for review, right, at the journal of choice. But because of all these big costs in publication fees, a lot of researchers are just leaving their stuff on bioRxiv. They're like, this lives here. You know, this is my research. And the fact that one of the biggest things I'd love to change about academia is happening right now, it's changing, that gives me a lot of hope, you know, where like there's no more gatekeeping, where research truly is free, where the money comes from the government, comes from our taxes, comes from private individuals. But at the end of the day, we'll name a dog park after the rich benefactors, you know, make a little dog park, be like, oh, here's rich white guy 49. And that's great. But the final product of research has to be free, you know, and like that's where I would put on the like a angry mob hat and be like, knowledge must be free. You know, like IP is a different dragon. I hate IP, but I kind of understand why it needs to be there in some capacity. But research, no way. I'm not paying $35 for an article from 1972. Fuck.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you so much, Sebastian. And for everyone, follow Sebastian on Facebook, what is it, Twitter, Instagram?
Yeah.
Binomical Labs.
Yeah, binomicallabs.org. We have a Patreon where hopefully very soon we're going to actually have some pretty significant content to offer. If not, from the generosity of your hearts comes more cool stuff. I also have an Etsy store if you guys want to buy plasmids, $20 a pop, whatever you want, new plasmids every month. And oh yeah, on my GitHub, on the Binomical Labs GitHub, all this stuff is there. All the hardware, the code. My research partner does tremendous work with bash scripting. He's making genome sequencing and genome analysis really simple. He started a blog called Genomics for Artists, Genome Assembly for Artists. And it's like a series of how to actually do genome assembly using the tools around you and publicly available data or really cheaply sequenced data. Yeah, lots of really cool stuff. And
yeah, I'll put it all below. And yeah, please support Sebastian's Patreon, because Patreon is actually super important. Like I started doing Patreon maybe like 5 months ago. It changed like everything. Like I don't have to run around being like, how do I pay rent for my lab?
Yeah, and that's our goal too. It's hard to do the small thoughtful science we're doing is long form. So it's hard to have a monthly perk that constitutes long form science.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff is just like time with me, right? So for like $10 once a month, you have this uninterrupted block of time where you could just talk to me at the cost, which is a $120 value, because that's how much I charge per hour for consultation. So yeah, so I offer that, which is pretty cheap, but we need like $700 to pay for rent. That's it. So that's where we're aiming for, really modest. And all the money goes to this lab. Like I have like 2 pairs of shoes.
Same. No, honestly. But like it's nice. Yeah, we're totally covering our rent right now, and we are even able to buy, you know, some perishables and all this different stuff. So it's like, wow, we can do that, and like people are willing to give you money, and that's the truth. People are willing to give you money and support you.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I'm so thankful. I mean, we have a core patrons that have been there since the beginning, and they haven't asked for a single thing back. And we've been like quietly working, because to wrap up really quick, a lot of what we want to do, we want to show with example. So we didn't want to say anybody can be a biologist unless we've published a paper, right? And we're like this close to putting it on bioRxiv. We already submitted our genome, right? So we have like one of the world's best genomes for Deinococcus radiophilus, 879x coverage, beautifully annotated. It's a stunning piece of amateur biology done by mostly done by my friend Sung, who's a freaking bioinformatics wizard. Once we have that publication in hand, nobody can say that an amateur can't do research in modern day. And we can use that in point to say like, okay, here's one extreme example. You don't have to do this, but here's how far you can go if you so choose, right? And that's why we've been quiet the last couple of years, also because of COVID. But that's our main focus, is like once we have that paper out, we're revamping everything and and basically putting our money where our mouth is. Just be like, we're not just saying people can do science and make you feel all nice and warm. It's just like, here's physical proof that a person who is actually homeless and a person who's actually broke coming together to do biology is possible. What could you do? You know, like what kind of curiosities do you have?
Yeah, well,
yeah,
that's impressive. Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you so much for being on this podcast. Yeah, everyone go support Sebastian, send him love, and just follow his his lab journal is amazing. I've been following your lab journal for a while now, like a stalker, to be honest.
Yeah, links in my bio. Every social media thing, there's a link there, and I have all my lab notebooks. And I do one every year because they get too big. The two years ago was like 500 pages. It was insane. But I'm an open book, so feel free to ping me on whatever network.
Yeah, thanks.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This was really fun.
Yeah, that's a wrap on this podcast. Thank you, Sebastian. That was very, very meaningful and well said and just beautiful.
Sorry for rambling if I did.
No, it's like, I like how you put out a lot of like emotion, and that was kind of very poetic in a way. Oh, I love that.